The Old Testament holds many stories of faith and redemption. But among them lies a tale so harrowing that it shakes the soul, a story that reveals the depth of human depravity and the consequences of abandoning divine guidance. Found in the final chapters of the book of Judges, this narrative unveils a tragedy that cuts deep into the fabric of Israel's history, exposing the chaos of a nation without leadership and the weight of choices made in darkness. The account begins in a time of moral decay and societal disorder, a period marked by the haunting refrain, "In those days, Israel had no king, everyone did what was right in their own eyes." It was a time when justice faltered, and the absence of accountability gave rise to acts that defied humanity itself. In the shadow of this tumult, a Levite and his concubine embarked on a journey, a path that would lead to betrayal, violence, and a descent into madness. The story is unflinching in its detail, describing a night that began with misplaced hospitality and ended in unspeakable horror. A house, meant to be a refuge, became the stage for an atrocity as the concubine was thrust into the hands of evil men, subjected to unimaginable suffering. By dawn, she lay lifeless on the threshold, a silent testament to the depravity of the times. What followed was no less shocking. The Levites' gruesome response sent shockwaves through the tribes of Israel, igniting a chain of events that led to civil war, thousands of deaths, and the near destruction of an entire tribe. This story is not merely a historical recounting but a mirror held up to humanity's darkest impulses, challenging us to confront the consequences of turning away from God's light. In those days, when Israel had no king, chaos and darkness loomed over the land. Each man lived according to what seemed right in his own eyes, and the absence of leadership allowed sin to fester unchecked. Among the many tragic tales from this era, one stands out as a chilling reminder of the depths to which humanity can fall. It is a story of betrayal, violence, and the catastrophic consequences of moral decay. A Levite, residing in the rugged mountains of Ephraim, took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. She was from the south, and he lived in the north, a union that symbolized an unlikely bond. But their relationship soon fractured. The woman was unfaithful, leaving him to return to her father's house in Bethlehem, where she stayed for 4 months. Despite her betrayal, the Levite's heart yearned for her. He set out on a journey to bring her back, traversing the rocky terrain with determination and hope. When he arrived in Bethlehem, her father welcomed him with warmth and generosity. For days, the father urged the Levite to stay, delaying their departure with feasts and assurances of hospitality. Yet, after much hesitation, the Levite resolved to leave, taking his concubine and setting out on the long road back to Ephraim. As night fell, they approached the city of Jebus, later known as Jerusalem. The Levite's servant, wary of the encroaching darkness, suggested they rest there. But the Levite, mistrustful of the Jebusites, insisted on continuing to Gibeah, a city of fellow Israelites. Surely there, he thought, they would find safety and hospitality. But when they arrived, no one in Gibeah offered them shelter. It was an ominous sign of the moral decay that had taken hold of Israel. At dusk, an old man returning from his work in the field saw the travelers in the square. Learning they had no place to stay, he insisted they come to his home. The Levite, grateful, assured the man that they needed nothing but a roof over their heads. It seemed they had found refuge at last. But as the night deepened, the men of Gibeah surrounded the house. Their demands were vile, their intentions wicked. They called for the Levite to be handed over to them, seeking to violate him in a horrifying act of violence. The host, in an attempt to protect his guest, offered them his virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine instead. It was a grotesque gesture that revealed the twisted values of a broken society. The men of Gibeah refused. In desperation, the Levite forced his concubine outside, abandoning her to the mob. They seized her, and throughout the night, they abused her mercilessly. When the first light of dawn broke, they released her. Gravely injured, she crawled back to the house, collapsing at the threshold with her hands outstretched. When morning came, the Levite opened the door and found her lifeless body. He called for her to rise, but there was no response. Her death was a stark testament to the night's unspeakable horrors. The Levite lifted her body onto his donkey and began the journey home, his heart heavy with sorrow and rage. Upon reaching Ephraim, he made a shocking decision. He divided her body into 12 parts and sent them to the tribes of Israel. Each piece carried a message, a call to action against the atrocity committed by the men of Gibeah. The entire nation was horrified. Never before had such a thing been seen in Israel. The tribes gathered in outrage, united by the gravity of the crime. They demanded justice. The tribe of Benjamin, to which Gibeah belonged, refused to surrender the guilty men. Tensions escalated into civil war. Thousands of Israelites died in the conflict, and the tribe of Benjamin was nearly obliterated, leaving only 600 men alive. In the aftermath of the war, the surviving tribes faced a moral dilemma. They had sworn an oath not to give their daughters in marriage to Benjamin. Yet they feared the extinction of one of Israel's tribes. Seeking a solution, they attacked a nearby clan and took 400 women to give as wives. Still, 200 men were without partners. During a festival, the remaining men of Benjamin were allowed to abduct women, ensuring the survival of their tribe while technically upholding the oath. The story of Gibeah is not just a tale of violence but a stark reflection of what happens when humanity strays from God's guidance. It reveals the catastrophic consequences of poor decisions and the absence of moral accountability. This harrowing account offers profound lessons. The opening verse, "In those days Israel had no king," underscores the chaos that arises when leadership and responsibility are absent. Without accountability, people are prone to act according to their desires, often with devastating results. It also highlights the importance of dignity. Every human being bears the image of God. Yet the host and the Levite fail to honor the value of the women in their care. Their actions demonstrate the dangers of objectifying others and dehumanizing those entrusted to us. The narrative shows the peril of drifting away from God. As Israel strayed from divine principles, moral decay took root. The book of Judges chronicles this decline, culminating in the horrors of Gibeah. It serves as a warning that distance from God leads to unimaginable actions. Moreover, the story illustrates how one wrong decision can spiral into greater tragedy. The crime in Gibeah led to civil war, the loss of countless innocent lives, and the near destruction of a tribe. Every decision has repercussions that can ripple far beyond what we anticipate. Yet, even in this dark tale, there is a glimmer of hope. God's grace is evident in the restoration of the tribe of Benjamin. Despite their sin, they were given a path to rebuild. This reminds us that no failure is beyond redemption when we turn back to God. The final words of the book of Judges encapsulate the tragedy. In those days, Israel had no king, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. It is a call to reflect on the importance of aligning our lives with God's will, knowing that our choices carry eternal significance. May we learn from this story, striving to walk in righteousness and seeking God's guidance in all that we do.